Okay, I have a number of things on my mind this morning, and maybe some of you will be interested in what I have to say. Why should today be any different? So you may want to turn this off. First of all, I want to talk about the situation that's going on in Gaza. You know where I stand on this if you've watched any of these before, but it's just, I turn on the TV and you see Gaza is just rubble. There's no place for these people to go to hide from Israeli bombs. They're dropping 2,000-pound bombs that they've gotten from the United States, and now Biden wants more. And now there's apparently widespread starvation. Bibi Netanyahu is on a mission to exterminate the Palestinian population of Gaza. And then he's going to turn his attentions to the West Bank. If you don't see that, you're not looking. So those of you who want to defend Israel and say it's okay, Israel was attacked, look at 1,200 people were killed, ignoring the 20,000 people that have been killed by Israel, and ignoring what's happening to the Palestinian people as a whole, open your eyes. It's not about defending Israel. It's about destroying the Palestinian populations so Israel can have the land from the river to the sea, and the Likud party, Bibi's cabinet, and Bibi himself have made it clear they don't want a two-state solution, which means they want a one-state solution, and that one state is going to be Israel, and Israel's going to do everything it can to get rid of anybody who jeopardizes that, aka the Palestinians. It's disgusting. And if you don't see that, then you have fundamentally lacking in any moral compass. I'm sorry, but I watch this and I want to throw up. It's just disgusting to see what this Israeli government is doing to these poor people who didn't do anything. Remember, Hamas is not the Palestinian people. There's a few people in Hamas, and most of the people in Hamas that were involved in what happened on October 7th were a bunch of kids who were disgusting individuals who went out and just committed murder. But that's not the Palestinian people. 20,000 Palestinian people have been killed so far, and that's probably, also somebody from our State Department saying, it's probably a lot more. And it sure as heck it is, because so many of these kids are buried under rubble. And it's, I'm seeing this at the Christmas season when we're supposed to be happy, and I see people being very nice to each other all over the place here. And then I look at what's going on over there, and it's like those Israelis don't give a damn who they hurt. And American Jews, particularly American Jewish politicians, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, who stand up there and support Israel come hell or high water, they need to take a hard look in the mirror. They need to take a look in the mirror. Okay, that's number one. I want to get off my chest because every time I see it, it's more and it's worse and it's worse and it's more. Part number two. I'm so tired of these lawyers they put on TV. Usually, like he was a former prosecutor. Well, my dad was the first assistant U.S. attorney after he was head of the Status of Forces prosecutions in Europe, and that was in Indiana. And later, he was deputy attorney general for Indiana. My dad was the real thing. But there's all kinds of people who work for U.S. attorneys, and they come in and they work for like a year or two or whatever, and then they go off on something else. They're not experts on federal procedure. Now, I am an expert on federal procedure, and I'm saying that not to brag, but so I'll have some credibility with those of you who are still watching. So just basically, I've been practicing law for over half a century now. I've had tried federal district court cases all over this country. I've handled appeals in more than half of the U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals, and I've had 3 cases in the United States Supreme Court. So I know procedure. And I'm talking now about the stay that's in effect in the D.C. case against Trump. And the U.S. attorney from the Justice Department lawyer who's handling this thing, Mr. Smith, asked the United States Supreme Court to expedite the appeal, which is presently pending in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they turned him down. And so all of a sudden, there's all these, Miss So-and-so used to be a U.S. attorney, says, and I was watching the guy this morning, he said, well, this is a big setback because this could now drag on for well past the election on to the following year. Well, yeah, it could, but the likelihood it's not very likely that it would. Why? Because I'm going to talk a little procedure here, and those of you who are not lawyers probably want to turn this out. But what happened is there's no such thing as automatic stays from decisions. Otherwise, no case would ever be finished. So normally, what happens is if you're trying a case, and I've had criminal cases in federal court, I've had civil cases in federal court, and if you lose something down on the trial court level, the district court level, you can't take an appeal until the case is over, whether it's federal, whether it's criminal or civil, and that's true in state court as well. You don't get an automatic right to appeal. When the case is over, then you do. Now, there are exceptions, like the anti-SLAPP laws, which calls for an immediate appeal after the anti-SLAPP decision is rendered. But other than that's specific by statute, it's not federal, it's state. And in the absence of that, you're just not entitled to. Now, there's an exception. The district court, if somebody wants to take an appeal, and call it an interlocutory appeal, means in the meantime, before the case is over, the district court can allow that and can stay the proceedings at the discretion of the district court. By the same token, a court of appeals can stay the proceedings pending the resolution of its appeal. So what happened in the Trump case is the trial judge stayed the proceedings. Said, we're gonna halt everything until I get a decision from the Court of Appeals. So Smith wanted to bypass that and go straight to the Supreme Court. That was denied. So now it's back to the Court of Appeals. They have a hearing coming up in the first week in January. They could very easily render a decision like the next week. They could render a decision the next day. This lawyer was on there was saying, well, they could take months. They could take a year to make a decision. Well, that's true. They could. I've had federal decisions both at the trial level and the court of appeal level where they took more than a year for a decision to come down. It could happen that way, but it's highly unlikely. Why? Because the Court of Appeal has expedited this entire proceeding. They've expedited the briefing. They expedited the date for the oral hearing. Why would they do all of that and then stop everything and say, we're going to wait a year to come down with the decision? To be consistent with what they've done so far, they'll have a decision in short order, at which point in time there are two options by the Trump lawyers. One is they can ask for an en banc hearing. Hopefully you know what en banc hearings are. If you don't, you should look it up, because I'm tired of lawyers getting on there and taking simple legal terms that everybody should know, like en banc, and describing it in great detail, which I'm now going to do, which is that if you lose your case to the 3-judge appellate panel, you can then go back to that court and say, I ask that all the judges in this circuit hear my case. Basically it's a rehearing. Now, that almost never are granted. I'm one of the few lawyers that had one granted. And that was a requested a rehearing in a patent infringement case before the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which handles patent appeals. And the 3-judge panel, instead of deciding the issue, suggested to their fellow brethren on the court that they don't decide it, that it be decided by the full court. And so I did that. We had this thing, was a packed courtroom, and everything was quite dramatic. We lost that en banc, but then we took the case to the United States Supreme Court and we won there. It was actually 2 cases in one. So that's an en banc hearing. They can do that. And the trial judge can keep, and they've got a long time with it when we should make that call, unless the time is shortened by the Court of Appeals. The other thing they can do is go to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to take it under writ of certiorari. Again, my guess is the court would deny that because they think they want this thing to play out. But regardless, those things could happen. You could have a delay while the Court of Appeals waits for a request for en banc, and then they have a delay while they decide to grant or deny the en banc. Then they could stay in effect while they go to the Supreme Court on a petition for writ. And the Supreme Court could then, it could stay held until the Supreme Court decides whether or not to grant it. And if they grant it, then and the whole thing could take a couple of years, maybe longer. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen. And the way all these people talk is as though, the people I've been listening to on CNN or whatever, is as though that is going to happen. Well, it doesn't not necessarily going to happen at all. Who instituted the stay? The district judge. So if the Court of Appeals comes down, as I expect they will, and affirms unanimously the decision of the district judge, mainly because she's right, then it goes back to the district court, or not. They can still move it along with asking for en banc and the Supreme Court, this, that, and the other. But the trial judge isn't bound by that. The trial judge can say, well, I've got a decision, and now I'm going to lift my stay and we'll go forward. And what does go forward mean? It means discovery, really. It means the Trump's team has the right to and obligation to go forward and seek whatever information they need, and to just move forward and prepare if they're going to follow the motions, but file the other motions. Just move along. She can do that. It's entirely in her discretion. Now, can the Court of Appeals overturn her? Sure, but if they've unanimously denied, affirmed her decision and denied Trump's seeking to overturn it, the odds are pretty slim that they're going to then stay the court while somebody wastes time seeking en banc review, which they're not going to get, and or going to petition to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court could stay it. They're not going to. The Court of Appeals could stay it. They're probably not going to. And I doubt if the district judge is going to, which means this thing could be back on track by mid-January. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's certainly a possibility, and I think the probability. And the only lawyer out there on all these talking head shows who's saying the same thing, and I'm not saying it because he said it, is George Conway, whom I like more and more. Even though he was, I think, president of the Federalist Society when he was at law school. I think he went to Yale or Harvard, one of those two. I get those two mixed up. And neither one of them has a football team that's worth a damn, which means you should be rooting for Michigan to beat Alabama. I know. You'd rather I talk about football than this other stuff, and I would frankly rather talk about football myself, as long as Michigan is winning, which they are. Go Blue. Okay, so that's two of the subjects I wanted to discuss today. Oh my God, I've lost my entire audience. Francois, do you want to hear any of this? Stupid dog. He's not the least bit interested in my opinions. Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop now because I've worn myself out. I'm exhausted. I can imagine how you feel. Anyway, Merry Christmas.